Well, I just tried something. I was gonna put this camera on my little strap on my head here today and drive down to my fishing hole and see if it worked. My phone, actually, not my camera. If you look over here, you see that I brought my GoPro knockoff, but I don't know how to use it yet, so I figured I'd put this on my head. But I put it on there, and as soon as I did, it turned it off. So everything I said got knocked off. But here's basically why I'm doing this. I go fishing a lot. I've been fishing since I was 3 years old. I'm headed to a place called Prairie Queen, and I found a lot of fish in this one area. So it's going to be, hopefully it'll be as good as it was yesterday, and we can see a lot of action and get a lot of information about the difference between, you know, two different people that are out there and why one's catching more than the other. It really has a lot to do with, of course there's some chance involved, but sometimes people think one guy's just so much luckier than the other one and teases them about it. But when it really boils down to it, there's probably something that person's doing. It's not just probably, there is something that person's doing that's different than the others, and I'm gonna go over some of that while I'm there. And I decided to go over it a little bit here because it's easier to control my phone right now while I'm not fishing, and I'm gonna have to find ways to get this thing to work while I'm out there, and I might not get to, so I'm gonna go over some of those points now. I'm just going for crappie right now because a lot of people, when they get a chance to fish, they're not avid and haven't fished like for bass or whatever for so many years. They just get a chance to take their kids out and go fishing, and I see it kind of not being, the kids start to get bored because there's some techniques that are happening in the same area where someone's catching a lot of fish that are not productive. I don't like focusing on non-productive things, but I feel like I have to mention them in order to accentuate the positives on why some people are doing a little bit better. When you go to a place and they have a lot of range of fish, and you just want to have a good time and catch a lot of fish, and you're not really out there to break any world records, but you want your kids to have fun and teach them how to do something that's a little more productive than, you know, hanging out with the wrong kids or whatever. It'd be nice if they're actually having some success, or they might lose interest. So I'm gonna have to bring out some negatives real quick. And one of the negatives I see is when I really love to use jig heads. I use very, very light jig heads, and I'm gonna put a lot of information into a little bit of space. One thing I noticed, that anything natural in life that hits the water does not just sink to the bottom super, super fast. There are times when you want to go down to the bottom real quick when that's where they are, and then work the fish that way. But when you have nice clear water and the fish can see from the bottom to the top, if it's falling lightly, they're gonna believe it more. So I like to use, like, a lot of times it ends up being just a little jig head with like a 1/32 ounce weight on it, and I just tie it straight to the line. I like to use very, very light line, between maybe, I usually don't go under 4, but some people go from 2 to maybe 8. I've caught, and so even if you end up with a big fish on accident and you're really going for little fish, you can still play them right, you know, if you set your drag properly, and get some of those in too. But if you're just going for those medium fish and you're trying to have a lot of fun, then stay between like 4 and 8 for me. I'll be at 6 pound today, and hope for a variety of fish, like maybe bass, walleye, and crappie, but I'm mostly gonna go for the crappie. Here's tip number one. Tip number one is, I've already mentioned it, go light. So go very light, because everything that hits the water doesn't just sink right to the bottom. Everything natural, like a worm or a bug or whatever, once it sinks naturally. It sinks slow. So if you go light on the jig head, it's going to sink kind of slow, especially when you put a lure on it that's like rubber, because it's going to give it buoyancy and it's going to fall kind of slow. But just because it falls slow doesn't mean you don't want to be down low, because between the bottom of the lake and the top of the lake, what is there? There's nothing in the middle. So all the good stuff that hides fish and helps them to ambush other little fish are down closer to the bottom when you're fishing this method that I'm fishing. Also, light line gives you far casting ability, so you can cast really, really far, cover a lot of distance. I'm going to be talking about lure fishing only. So we're going to be casting really far and moving our lure. I like to move my lure very, very slow. So the way you hook up your lure can make a difference, whether you're bumping into things. And I also like to use brass hooks. I'm putting a lot of information in real quick. The reason I use brass hooks is because once it hooks the fish and gets into their mouth, it doesn't bend the hook open. But when you hook something out in the water, it hooks it on the end of the hook. So if you pull hard enough, it'll bend that hook open and you'll get it back, and you won't have to lose a lot of lures doing that. Tip number two, tie straight on. Don't put swivels on when you're fishing for little fish. When you're fishing for medium-sized fish or crappie or anything like that, don't put swivels on there. Don't put anything on there. Tie it on tight. Learn a great knot. Tie it on tight and fish straight up. Just tie it right onto the line, and that's it. Cut the line off right at the end of it. Don't leave a lot of tag, because you want the lure to flow the way that it's supposed to flow. So if you don't have extra tag on the line, it's going to flow right. I got a few more tips to show you, but I'm here at the lake. I've been here for a little while. I'm going to turn the camera and just show you the lake. Let's see if I can flip it. Well, I'm going to just have to turn it. So out there is the lake that we're headed to. And if you look over here, there's a bridge. I hope you can see it. That's where I'm headed. Crappie like shade, and it is August, so it's a little bit warm still. So some of the prime water that they really love is going to be in the shade. And also crappie tend to love shade anyway. So my goal is crappie for the most part. But what could end up happening, and why I keep it versatile, I keep my lures versatile so that I can catch other fish, is so that if there's a walleye out there, or a bass, or a big bluegill or something like that, I can still have a chance at those guys. I bought some special little things. Like I said, what I'm going to be using today, and probably only that I'll be using, is a little jig head and different things to put on the jig head. And this will be all about lure fishing. You're always moving your lure. So I'm going to turn it off for now. I hope you get a lot of information out of this so far. And I probably look pretty funny with a little strap on my head. It's actually a tie. I go to work with ties, and so I tied a tie on my head, so I'm really weird. So, but anyway, I'm headed out there, and I'll turn it back on in a minute. When I get out there, I'll try to set this up where you can see the water and maybe get some action, and I'll make some sense out of it. Alright, take care guys. Hope you learned something for real.